Councillor Blackett.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Brown.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Councillor Chowd-Turvey.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Councillor Goodall.
Here.
Councillor Cloppert.
Yes, I'm here. And also, Kirsty, to remind, of course, that I'll be leaving at 2 o'clock due to an appointment.
Thank you, Councillor Cloppert. Councillor Petrie.
Here.
Councillor Ross.
Good afternoon.
And Councillor Withy.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Right, our next piece of business is item 10. Excuse me while I scroll up my screen. APP 2026-0858. Neil, can you take us through the presentation, please?
I don't think Neil's here.
Oh. Should have extended the settlement to include officers. Right. Kirsty, are you aware of a reason for Neil not being here? Or
No,
Tim?
I'm just trying to see if we can get him in now.
I
Thank
can't
you.
see Cheryl either.
Well, Cheryl's
Oh, you are. Sorry, Cheryl. I
Cheryl
can
is
see
here.
you. Sorry.
Graham is here.
I think we hopefully have Neil now.
Thank you. Neil, do we have you?
Yep.
Good. We're just looking at 0858. Could you take us through that, please?
Yep, of course, Chair. Another one that's at committee due to member deferral. This one is being recommended for refusal. Relates to a replacement door on a property within the Huntly Conservation Area. I will quickly run through the slide. You'll of course see the discussion in the detail. So here's the existing door, traditional timber door. Here's some other doors nearby in the conservation area. The proposal is for a navy blue, dark blue composite door, which is unsympathetic in its material and appearance in the conservation area. And typically in the conservation area, we want traditional materials, which are timber, and where you do have timber, you want to replace like for like or improve if it's an inferior material. So here's our property. Here's existing and proposed elevation, which in plan form does look no different, but you need to remember that the door is a completely different material and colour. So that is quite simply it, Chair. One thing I would add that isn't in our report because it was a decision that came after our report, but there is some key takeaways from it. There was an appeal decision recently at a property north of Huntly at Rothiemay. Now it was a listed building rather than being within the conservation area, but the theory remains the same about when we're dealing with built heritage, that any alteration to a property needs to be appropriate and sympathetic. Now this proposal on a listed building at Rothiemay was to replace the existing window vents on the property with acoustic vents, which are obviously modern in appearance, far more chunky, not respectful of the listed building. Now that listed building consent was refused due to the inappropriateness of the proposed trickle vents and the harm that would have on the external appearance of that listed building. And the appeal decision was to dismiss the appeal and uphold the planning services decision to refuse that. So that does just show that what may seem minor and relatively inconsequential actually does matter. If we keep ignoring the policy position on listed buildings and conservation areas, then it just devalues the planning system, for lack of a better phrase. But the policies are there for a reason, to protect and preserve and uphold the character of the conservation area. And there are many ways to replace a door on a property. And the point of the planning system in this instance is to make sure it's done in the most appropriate and sensitive way We don't consider this navy composite door to be appropriate, and it's recommended for refusal. So I'll stop there, Chair, but we do have Cheryl here, who's the team leader of our Built Heritage team, and she can just expand or elaborate on anything that I've said.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Neil. Cheryl, do you have? Can you speak to the Built Heritage objection, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, I mean, Neil's presented the report pretty well there, so I don't have a huge amount to add. But it's just really to give you a bit of background as to like how we end up in decisions in cases like this. So the building that we're looking at is a particularly good example of a 19th century building in Huntly. It appears on the maps in the early 1800s. Has really nice timber sash and case. It's got some really nice timber detailing in the upper dormers in terms of the dentils. It's got a really good quality hardwood front door. And nice, obviously stained glass glazing above it. So really, in terms of the actual building, it does have a very strong presence, and it does add to the character of Huntly itself. So in terms of both the Aberdeenshire Local Development Plan and MPF4, when it comes to historic buildings, that emphasis is always on that kind of retention and restoration. And then if we do come to the point where we need to replace, then you're looking for that kind of highest quality design that you can. And I pulled out really the Historic Environment Scotland have a managing change guidance on doorways, which basically helps us interpret the policy in relation to MPF4 and the local development plan. And what they say is that they suggest that maintenance and repair is the best means of safeguarding the historic character of a doorway. And this also reduces the requirement for new raw materials and the energy use in its production. So when we seek the retention of the door, we're not only supporting the policies in terms of the historic environment, but we're also looking at those policies in terms of carbon reduction and sustainability. So the door in question is from the 19th century. It's hardwood timber, which would be a much superior quality to any modern timber door that you could get today. And the proposed replacement is composite, which we would see as significantly inferior in comparison. It doesn't quite replicate the detailing of the original door. So when you look at it closely, the proportions and the profiling of the panels are not quite the same. And finally, the current application doesn't put anything in terms of justifications to why we're losing the door. Like, what are the issues? What is it they're trying to address? What is it they're trying to achieve? So I guess in summary, we're looking at it as we've got a high quality door here that contributes to the conservation area. There's not a huge justification within the application. There may be justification, but it's not demonstrated to us. Coupled with the fact that the replacement isn't what we would class as high quality and doesn't authentically replicate the original. So from our perspective, there's nothing in the policy that allows us to support this currently. Had it come in with reasoned justification and potentially a better quality door that was more alike to the door that's currently there, we might have viewed it differently. But based on the information that we have, then that's our final decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cheryl. Do members have questions for Cheryl or for Neil? Councillor Petrie?
Thanks, Chair. Just a question for clarification. Is the building listed? I don't think it is, but have I just missed that in the report? It was just for clarification there.
It's not listed. It's within the conservation area.
Any other questions? Do members have sufficient information, or do they require a site visit, etc.? See a hands up from Councillor Blackett. Do we all have sufficient information? Okay. So, discussion and debate. Anyone like to comment, discuss? Councillor Blackett.
I'm happy to let Councillor Petrie as the local member go first.
Generous of you. Councillor Petrie.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Blackett. Yeah, again, another one that I have referred to committee today because I actually disagree with the officer recommendations before us, which probably comes as no surprise to anyone. I know this area particularly well, and I can agree that it's a pretty building, etc., etc. However, I don't think, in my opinion, that the door proposed detracts enormously from the character of the town. I think it says within the report somewhere that there are a number of other composite doors in the area, and I think that's where we're at with Huntly, is that although we've tried to maintain this conservation area, actually what we have is a mishmash of everything across the town, and it means that houses which do have current timber doors or windows are having to, you know, comply with stricter rules around replacements, etc. But, you know, next door they've got a door that is composite, and so I just think in this instance, looking at it, it would be, you know, you said if you look closely, it's not identical. I don't think anyone's walking down that street and examining the doors in that detail, and that's not me trying to be flippant or downplay it in any way. But I just think, knowing the context of that street, etc., looking at the door proposed and the current situation of other doors in the street, I don't think it detracts to any great extent, and therefore I would be looking to approve the planning application on the basis that I don't believe that it is detrimental to the conservation area. I will add in that we do obviously have a review coming up, which I won't be taking part in, but it may be that this falls out with the conservation area anyway, following discussions later today. But regardless, if it stays within the conservation area, I don't believe that there's any reason to refuse this on the basis that it's detrimental.
Thank you, Councillor Petrie. Councillor Blackett.
I don't like disagreeing with my friend, Councillor Petrie, but I do disagree. I think that the colour, before you even start, having a navy blue when everything else is white. So I'm happy to listen to other people, but I don't agree with Councillor Petrie.
Thank you, Jiva. Councillor Withy.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be very, very brief because Councillor Petrie's effectively said everything that I would have said. So it's just really to come in and to support what she says. You know, I'm happy enough for them to go ahead and replace the door. And just to touch on what she mentioned as well, the timing of this isn't ideal given the paper that we've got coming up later on, which I'll obviously share my thoughts on, but no, I'm happy to support what Councillor Petrie said in this. I don't see an issue. I think we do have to draw a line at some point.
Thank you, Robbie. Councillor Ross.
I appreciate this conservation area, and I understand, I've read the paper and understand what's been said. However, I'm content to support Councillor Petrie. I think we can be too prescriptive, and if the colour of the door is a different colour from the rest of the street, I'm not bothered about that. We've also, within context, got to allow personal choice too. And if we're too prescriptive, we're using a hammer, a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And I'm happy to support what's been said by Councillor Petrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. No other hands. Neil.
Yeah, just a very brief point of clarity, and I think Councillor Petrie did make it clear, but it's also just a bit of a backpedal from a slight oversight in our report that in section 9.1 under development plan departures it says none. Of course, the view of the planning service is that this is a departure, hence the reason for refusal. And in the planning service's view, the proposal doesn't comply with policies P1, P3 and HE2 of the LDP and policies 7, 14 and 16 of MPF4. But what I believe Councillor Petrie has said is that she disagrees, obviously, and considers the replacement of the door to not have any detrimental effect on the conservation area, and it is appropriate to the character and setting of the building, and therefore does comply with the aforementioned policies. So it was just that point of clarity here that this isn't a departure, it's just a difference of opinion, and in this instance the view from Councillor Petrie and shared by a couple others is that this is compliant with policy.
Thank you, Neil. Do we have a motion? Councillor Petrie.
Yeah, I would just move in line with what Neil has just said. He always puts it more eloquently than what I can do on the first day back after, second day back after recess, sorry, that I do think it's compliant. I don't think it is detrimental to the conservation area, and therefore I would approve the planning application.
Thank you, Councillor Petrie. Councillor Withy?
Yeah, over 9 years, and I still, as much as I try, can't explain things as well as Neil. Thank you, Neil. Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Do we have an amendment? Councillor Blackett?
Yeah, I think we erode our conservation areas at our peril, and therefore I'm going to propose an amendment that we go with the planner's recommendation to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor Blackett. Seconder? I don't see a seconder. Therefore, the amendment fails. Okay. I take it then that I'm just checking hands just to make sure. Okay. Right, moving along. It would now seem that we have a contrary. Oh, Councillor Turvey.
Sorry, I'm just trying to gauge, and I don't have problem with colors because, I think that in the towns where like those are all different colors is lovely and cheerful. And I do understand the annoying things that every houses have different rules, and if you want to be more strict, I mean, like, all the conservation area houses should have then wooden doors, to be with the style of the era and thing like that. Are we creating a precedent here, though? If we allow this one, then everyone will want to change their windows frames or their door frames, and it's just like free for all. I know every planning on its own merit, but I think on this one more even than the one we had on the agritourismo, we are creating even a crazier precedent for a conservation area.
Thank you for that, Councillor Turvey, but we've actually moved away from debate. We have a motion on the table.
Yeah.
Are you seconding?
Yeah, I will second.
Blackett?
For that reason, I will second Councillor Blackett. Yes, please.
That's fine. So we have a motion and we have an amendment. Kirsty, could you take us through? I think it should be Kirsty, should it?
Thank you, Chair. So there is a motion from Councillor Petrie, seconded by Councillor Withy, which is to grant the application on the grounds that the replacement of the door is not considered to have any detrimental effect on the conservation area and is appropriate to the character and setting of the building and therefore complies with the relevant policies. The amendment is from Councillor Blackett, seconded by Councillor Chowturvey, and that is to refuse in line with the report recommendation. Councillor Blackett.
Amendment.
Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Chowturvey.
Amendment.
Councillor Goodall.
Motion.
Councillor Cloppert.
Motion.
Councillor Petrie.
Motion.
Councillor Ross.
Motion.
And Councillor Withy.
Motion.
There are 6 votes for the motion and 2 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried to grant the application.
Thank you, Kirsty. And that is all of our planning matters dealt with. So I can hand back to Councillor Blackett, who will take us through the rest of our agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, can I offer my thanks to Councillor Goodall for very eloquently chairing the planning part and giving me a bit of a break because it's quite a heavy day today. So now we move on to item 11, which is the Aberdeenshire Health and Social Care Partnership Performance Report for Strategic Delivery Plan. And we are being asked to note the contents of Appendices 1A to 1C and Appendix 2 and provide feedback on local health and social care service delivery issues for onward reporting to the Aberdeenshire Integration Joint Board where appropriate. And I'm welcoming Janine Howie, Laura Tom, Fiona Lovey, Stephanie Dukitt, I think you're all here, Shona Campbell or Angela MacLeod. Perhaps it's Anne, but perhaps I'll hand over to Janine to take the paper forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Janine Howie, Partnership Manager for South Aberdeenshire. I have two of my team here, Laura Tom, who's our Mental Health and Learning Disability Service Manager for South Aberdeenshire, and Stephanie Ducat, who is the Location Manager for Aboyne and Bankery. And we've got Angela MacLeod, who's a Programme Manager from the Strategy team. So welcome this opportunity to come and speak to you today about our strategic plan and give you an update on our performance, and also for you to have the opportunity to ask us about any local issues for health and social care. I'm actually going to hand over to Angela just to go through the strategic and performance aspects of the report.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this report to the Area Committee today. As set out in the first three appendices included within your report, 1A to 1C, these provide information on the Partnership's first quarterly performance report on our new strategic delivery plan, which has been developed following the Integration Joint Board's, the IJB's approval of our new 10-year strategic plan. And in addition, at Appendix 2, we have included a more local update on key issues and activities from our health and social care team within the local area. In December, the Aberdeenshire IGB, as noted, approved our new strategic plan for 2025 to 2035, and that sets out our new agreed vision and strategic priorities over that period. At the same time, the IGB also approved the supporting strategic delivery plan, which provides more detail on the strategic objectives and work streams, which at this stage we've identified as being key to delivering on the partnership strategic priorities over the next 3 years. It will be reviewed regularly with progress reported quarterly to the IGB. And in developing the plan, we have acknowledged that it is likely to evolve and new work streams may be added to the plan, subject to IGB approval, just ensuring we remain responsive to new challenges or new drivers. Appendix 1B attached with your papers provides the report, which covers the period of 1st of January to 31st of March 2026. This is an initial report structure as we've been undertaking work to refine and shape our wider performance framework in consultation with the IGB. So at this stage, it's really a report on key highlights, risks and emerging milestones across all work streams, given some of these are still in their early stages. We are currently compiling information for the second quarter report, and that's currently being finalised for reporting to the IGB, but unfortunately was not available for this report just due to committee timings. But our 6 monthly reporting to area committees will obviously continue, and at the time of our next report to area committee, we would expect to be presenting a more developed format once agreed with the IGB, which will aim to strengthen assurance and evidence around the outcomes and impact of our various strategic work streams. I think for the period covered by this report, I'd just like to briefly highlight some of the key developments, which include completion of phase 1, the planning investigation phase of the Community Hospital Strategic Review project. So this focused on ensuring understanding of activity, challenges, strengths across our Aberdeenshire community hospitals and community healthcare provision, and that included a significant engagement process late last year, the outcomes of which were reported to the IGB in January, and work is now progressing to phase 2 with the aim of developing that longer term route map that will support a sustainable, equitable, safe and responsive provision across all of our community hospital sites. Our new adult carer strategy was also approved by the IGB in March, and that's a key requirement under the Carers Act, but obviously a central focus for the partnership, recognising the invaluable role and contribution of unpaid carers, and so looking as to how we can focus efforts and resources to support unpaid carers to sustain their caring role and to maintain a fulfilling life alongside caring. As attached to Appendix 1C, a supporting delivery plan has been under development to ensure a clear focus around our agreed priorities and tasks in relation to the carer strategy. And the final delivery plan is to be agreed, hopefully very soon, by the Adult Carer Strategy Delivery Group, which includes carers with lived experience. And in the interim, a range of work is continued by the team alongside our commissioned carer support service, VSA, across Aberdeenshire. Our strategic review of care homes and very sheltered housing continues to progress well, and we have a market position statement that's currently in development. And the aim of that is to be able to clearly set out the partnerships commissioning strategy and position for older people's care home and very sheltered housing provision in the future. Again, recognising the importance of this resource and ensuring that we are responsive to the increasing complexity of need, and that we are supporting market stability, making best use of available resources, and most importantly, ensuring a clear focus on quality, dignity, safety and outcomes for older people in the future, long-term provision of care homes and very sheltered housing across Aberdeenshire. Lastly, I think I'd just note our Home First and Discharge Without Delay project. It's also a very significant area of activity. Discharge Without Delay, as you may be aware, it's a national whole system initiative, as the aim of is focused on most frail older people currently accessing hospitals in Scotland. As I say, a national wide initiative, but with the aim of ensuring that patients experience no negative consequences from hospital-induced harm or dependency, and that we establish integrated care pathways and services to support that. So within Aberdeenshire, there's 2 work streams that are being implemented under this initiative, and as part of the NHS Grampian Whole System Plan, that includes the Home First and Discharge to Assess work stream, which aims to facilitate discharge from hospital for people without delay, supporting them to undergo an accurate and comprehensive assessment of their care needs in a suitable homely environment. And then secondly, the community hospital and step down inpatient rehabilitation work stream, again focused on empowering the role of our community hospitals in delivering timely inpatient assessment and rehab for frail people within our localities, and supporting the full embedding of discharge without delay principles across the system. And that is to ensure a continued person-centred and enablement approach. We have, in the interim, also developed a new workforce plan and market facilitation plan. These were both approved by our IGB in May, and with our medium-term finance strategy and the strategic delivery plan itself, they provide the key strategic documents which underpin our overarching strategic plan, to provide a focus how we will deliver on our priorities within the agreed resources available to us, and in line with both local and national direction. I think just to conclude, I would stress that the strategic delivery plan is not exhaustive of all the hugely important work and activities of services across the partnership. As the report to committee notes, in the period since this quarterly report was presented to the IGB, we have also presented our annual performance report for 25-26, and that outlines a range of positive achievements and initiatives, as well as continued challenges for us in delivering health and social care services over the last year. As described in that report, and as through continued reporting to the IGB, there has been significant work undertaken in stabilising the partnership's financial position, and we continue to implement a range of activities as part of our health and social care sustainability programme, to support continued focus on ensuring sound financial governance whilst meeting our statutory duties, maintaining essential services and supporting people safely. And that annual performance report will also be presented to full council in due course. I'll just stop there. Thank you very much, Chair, and we would be pleased to take any questions regarding the report. Thank you.
Councillor Goodall.
Thanks for the report. It's very in-depth, and it's got a lot of positives in it, which we like to see. I really, looking at the key successes on page 223, I'm really pleased that the dementia service redesign has been a success, because it's important moving forward, as so many of our older folk needing that sort of a service, and the expansion for supporting groups of unpaid carers, I think it's a really good piece of work. That's just what I'd also like to say is that the discharge without delay, that it's a great idea, and hopefully it will move forward very quickly. But do we have the finances available to actually make that a really good reality?
Shall I come in, Chair?
Yes, Janine.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for your positive comments about the dementia service redesign. I think that's been a very positive piece of community work, very good multidisciplinary team working. We've just recently appointed a clinical lead for that service, and we're still appointing to some of the posts, but we hope to have a soft launch very soon. So I will brief local councillors further once that's implemented and we're up and running with the service. And yes, exciting opportunities to develop it as we progress, support unpaid carers and people living with dementia. In terms of the discharge without delay programme, we do have some funding to provide that service, and you know, funding is tight. Funding is tight for NHS Grampian, it's tight for Aberdeenshire Health and Social Care Partnership. However, you know, we have adequate financial resource to be able to deliver the programme that we have said we will deliver. So for example, our discharge to delay, discharge to assess, that is currently within a procurement process, and we're progressing to you know, with that programme, and hope to have that implemented within the, you know, the foreseeable future, which I think is a really exciting and new initiative for getting people home quicker and having them assessed within their homely environment, which is familiar to them, and they often function much better there and feel much more comfortable at home.
Does that answer all your questions?
Yes, I would just as a comment based on what Janine said. The other positive, obviously, is to release bed space in hospitals, and I'll very keenly watch how that programme progresses, because my fear is that we need to build capacity in the system, and do we have the funds to do that? And if we find that there isn't the capacity, then we're going to have to find the funds from somewhere, and that's going to be quite difficult. First door we have to chap on is the Scottish Government's door, but we'll see how we get on with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I appreciate we had an opportunity to speak to officers informally a few months ago, so we've explored a lot of the good news and some of the questions around that I maybe would have asked, but thank you for the updates and reporting in front of us. I was, like Jeff said, that you know, echo the positive sort of update and good news, and I was really interested to hear about the robot pilot, and that Allochburn's been chosen. And I appreciate the point also made in the paper is the fast tracking of the Wi-Fi. I know that's something that's been an aspiration for the home for a few years. I've asked on their behalf before, so that's great. And also on the Allochburn update, it mentions around the ongoing challenges. I think we're aware of them, but I was just wondering, and I appreciate it's a very different environment, working in a care home than care at home, but I just wondered if there is any sort of, if that mirrors the challenges in the care at home in the same geographical area, or, you know, is it never the same issue and challenge around recruiting care at home staff than care home staff? Because I know we see this routinely, and I just wondered if there was a geographical challenge across the area, when I appreciate some people you know, employ their own carers, so you won't have the full picture, but I just wondered out of curiosity if it was mirrored in other services within the remit of health and social care.
Who's going to answer that, particularly as you've seen Braemar Care in action, Janine?
That'll be me then. Yes, I mean, we do have a challenge with recruiting, as you're well aware, within this area, particularly because of the rurality of it, and then housing issues, for example. However, I believe that we are fully staffed at the moment within our care home. I can see Stephanie nodding at me, so that's extremely good news, and it allows us to move on to developments like having a robot within the care home and other initiatives that we have there. In terms of our care at home service, we're still within a service redesign at the moment, so we haven't been recruiting to posts as is per the policy when you're in a service review. So we haven't actually tried to recruit to that service for a while. However, I would say that the service design that the new model that will be put in place, it very much places our in-house home care in a niche type service. So we will be focusing on very much short-term support in terms of reablement, in terms of people who require end-of-life and palliative care. And it's not a model that any other provider does within Aberdeenshire. And I think that will give us opportunities to recruit to post when we are ready to do that recruitment, because it's something new, it's something exciting, and it's a real development for that service. Just to assure people as well, that doesn't mean to say that the in-house care home service won't continue providing the packages that it's already providing. They will continue to do that within a transitional phase at the moment. So it's just to assure people that have care packages that there won't be any change to their packages at present, although we do continue to work with our external providers as well to see what they can provide and bring to the table. But that's where we are with that at the moment, Councillor Brown. We're not recruiting to that service at the moment. As you know, we also have issues with recruiting to our community hospital. Aboyne in particular is a challenge. However, I think we've had some recent recruitment as there as well. So we're actually in quite a positive picture at the moment, which is good to see.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you to all the staff working in the Health and Social Care Partnership, in particular those on what I'm going to call the coalface. I know how hard it is working as a nurse in a community hospital and also as a carer. So my thanks go to all the staff that are delivering the care for us in Aberdeenshire. I've got some points having read the papers. Whilst it's being portrayed as a good news story, and I don't deny that there's good news there, it is, and it should be celebrated. I'm also would like to get under the veneer. Now, the first one was Aboyne Hospital, which my constituents go to from Bursmore and elsewhere. I was going to ask what the operational challenges are. Now, I appreciate that's operational, but I'd like to know what the challenges are. You have mentioned recruitment. Now, we've had problems with recruitment going back historically a very, very long time. So I would also like to know when we're hearing the good news, I would like to know if a different approach can be used to recruitment to solve the issues to our community hospitals. Because as we've heard, our community hospitals are essential to stop bed blocking within ARI. They are absolutely essential. If we lose our community hospitals, and we've lost Inch, then we have serious problems in ARI. So what are the operational challenges that Aboyne have faced, and what are we doing differently? This is my first question, to recruit to our community hospitals, please, because we need to think out of the box regarding this.
Janine?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ross, for your comments about our staff, who I agree work extremely hard and are very dedicated to their profession. So appreciate that. I suppose just want to clarify something there. when we're talking about people who are delayed discharge, waiting to go to, they're usually waiting to go to either care homes, or they're waiting to go home with a care package. Our community hospitals very much focus on rehabilitation. So people coming from ARI will come to our community hospitals for ongoing rehabilitation. They won't actually be delayed at that point. So that shouldn't have that much of an impact on ARI. Where they may then become delayed is when they're waiting in our community hospitals to then go to a care home or go back into the care at home. So I just wanted to clarify that. I wonder, Stephanie, do you want to say something about the recruitment approach in a Boyne hospital?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Janine. So we've had a number of contributing factors to our challenges at Aboyne of recent. We've had some staff on long-term sick, we've had some vacancies, we've had maternity leave, which have all occurred at the same time. We work very closely with our colleagues within NHS Grampian, looking at our recruitment processes. And we have been very successful over recent months on our recruitment. We've recruited a staff member internally who has requalified, which has been a great positive outcome for us to see her upskilling. And that has alleviated the gaps in our vacancies that we had. And we've been supporting staff members to return from sick leave. So that's certainly eased our operational challenges that we were experiencing. Holiday time and staff need annual leave just made a bit of a perfect storm, that we temporarily reduced our bed base to keep the people safe that we were supporting and caring for. But we are now in a reopening of that and in a much more positive position, thankfully. When we advertise our vacancies within a Boyne hospital, the volume of applicants we receive to our posts is astronomical. We have recently advertised for a band 5 staff nurse and closed the advert after 3 days because we had in excess of 100 applicants. Shortlisting that is an extensive task, as you'll appreciate, because we want to make sure that we are inviting the right people to interview. So we are really particular about people's understanding of Aboyne and the rurality of that. We do see a vast number of applicants from out with the local area. People make assumptions that they'll be able to secure lodgings, travel will be easy. And then the reality when we invite them to interview and we talk about the reality that we face in Aboyne often changes that for people. So it does add for a slightly different challenge for us given our rurality, but we're very clear in our applications, in our adverts that we're putting out now about what our local context is and what it would mean to work out in Aboyne. Alongside that, we've been working within colleagues in NHS Grampian on a newly qualified nursing programme. So we are hopeful that we will see an applicant from that for our one outstanding nursing vacancy. That candidate has had work placements whilst at uni within Aboyne, so does know the local area. So positive if we could then secure some future employment with her. So it's a very moving picture, but we are working very closely with our colleagues in NHS Grampian on that.
Thank you. That's really positive news. And I think hearing, I mean, in my day, it was Flying Start. I don't know if it's still called the Flying Start, but you were inducted into once you qualified and left university. So I'm pleased that you've got an applicant. I would have hoped it, I mean, it depends on the number of vacancies. I would have liked to have thought you've got more than one, but I think it's very positive news hearing about the number of applicants that you've had and that you've had to close the advertisement. So thank you. My next question is about the South Aberdeenshire Dementia Service redesign and the Sculty board. I appreciate that it's a success and congratulations on that. However, is it not true that a lot of the patients in the Morven ward, without wanting to identify anybody in general, can have dementia care needs? And are the qualified mental health staff on the Morven ward now to care for these patients, because previously these patients were cared for within the Scolty ward. I've been up there in the last few months, and the Scolty ward, as it was, is really empty. It's the, yes, there are staff in there who are working on the dementia service, I think it was, or something like that, or being part of it. But it's a vast resource that's sitting there that is empty. Surely that space could be reconditioned again to, yes, it would have to be staffed. Yes, that would have to be financed, but it would ease the pressure on elsewhere. And I'm thinking from ARI. So I'd be grateful if you could provide clarification regarding that. Thank you.
I think I'll ask Janine to come in and on that one, if that's all right, Janine.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so our community hospitals, and the vast majority of them have general wards, so they have patients with a wide variety of needs within them and health conditions. A lot of our community hospital wards have people with dementia in them. Just because you have dementia doesn't mean to say you need to be in a specialist ward. We have people living at home with dementia. We have people in care homes with dementia. So there's a spectrum of dementia, and people have different needs. They have different strengths. They have different abilities. So you can be cared for within a general ward, and often people with dementia will go in not because of their dementia, but because of a physical health condition, or because they're receiving some element of rehabilitation within our community hospitals. People who the Scolty ward was a dementia assessment unit, so that was for people with very complex needs due to their dementia, which was resulting in something that we call stress and distress behaviours. So people who are causing distress to themselves or to others in terms of how they're behaving due to their dementia. So it was important that they had an in-depth assessment and a care plan and a review of their medication, etc. We still have that option for people living within the South Aberdeenshire area. They do either go now to Ashcroft Ward in Inverurie, or they go into Royal Cornhill Hospital to receive that support. The point of the community dementia team, the new service, the enhanced dementia support team that we've created, is to be able to support those people within their own environment and to try and reduce admissions into hospital. Someone with dementia, it's really important that they keep their routines, that they have the same people around them, that they're in familiar circumstances. That is the best, that gives the best outcomes for people with dementia. So the specialist team that we've created, which we used some of the budget from the closure of the Scolty ward to create that specialist team. And this is a new initiative for Aberdeenshire. I think it's a really exciting initiative. We've our clinical lead's a psychologist who has expertise in that type of service delivery area, and they are a wraparound multidisciplinary team who will work with a person at home or in a care home, for example. That doesn't mean to say that some people won't have to go into hospital. Some people will have to have an inpatient assessment or treatment, but the aim is to try and reduce that, because that helps to reduce the stress and distress for people with dementia, and also for their carers to keep them within their own environment.
Thank you. If I could come back, please.
Briefly, please.
Yeah, the closure of the Scolty ward has meant, and I understand dementia. I'm going to be careful what I say here, but I understand dementia. I'm a former nurse. I'm not mentally health trained. I was an adult nurse, and adult nurses, I don't think they do now, but caring for people with dementia requires mental health experience. And I don't know how many in the Morven ward, how many trained staff have experience or are mentally health trained now, and that was one of my questions, please.
I'm afraid I'm going to disagree with you on that point, Councillor Ross. I don't feel that people with dementia require someone who is a registered mental health nurse to care for them. We have lots of people with dementia in our care homes who are more than adequately supported. Yes, I agree that staff need training, but I don't agree that they need to be a registered mental health nurse.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turvey.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nina, for this lovely report. And it's really nice to see that all the improvement that has been done over the last year or so. I'm just really glad that we are getting progress, and the carers have been looked after, and the process of getting people out of the hospitals, and that's so important. Be back at home, feel comfortable in their own beds, and that's just so important. And that's the thing for that service is really important. On back of that though, what I've been hearing from people is one of the problem is once people have the set package, care package and thing like that, and and what for me is very important is rehabilitation of the health and the strength, through physiotherapy, to the visit to the doctor, etc. But the most, and that's for me the most important. You should be recover as much as possible of your your health, but also one of the problem is I heard is that the follow-up of the care package need is hard to be done. That people are comfortable, and while they actually can do more by themselves, the review of what they still need as a support is not easy to do for the staff and for the families and things like that, and that will alleviate the pressure on the care packages and the staff as well. So any wisdom or how we can improve that, for them to alleviate the heaviness on for the health and care partnership.
Is that another one for you, Janine?
I think I might bring Stephanie in on this one, if that's okay. She's been working on our reablement programme, so she'd be ideal to speak to this one. Thank you, Councillor Turvey.
Thank you, Janine. One of our priorities in the delivery of our in-house home care service is to deliver a reablement service, and that's a very specific model of care that supports the individuals, the service users, to do what they can for themselves, with the overall aim to improve on their independence and to achieve outcomes at home. It's multi-purpose. It has great benefits to the individual if they're able to do more for themselves, create a level of independence, but it also supports a health and social care partnership, to utilise the limited resources that we do know in the best way possible, so that we get to the most vulnerable and the most in need, to support their needs as well. So we're working very closely with our home care service. I've been involved in undertaking a redesign of that reablement pathway, so that it is as streamlined as can be for our practitioners, both within our health and our social care setting, and utilise the care that we have available. Alongside that, we've been undertaking a review of the carer training that they receive, so that the carers we employ are as skilled as possible in delivering that reablement pathway. That starts both in hospital and in community referrals, and it's a pathway that our care management and social work colleagues, as well as our hospital colleagues, are committed to engaging with. So it's multi-purpose across the health and social care partnership. I think that answers your query.
Yeah, super. Thank you. That's lovely to hear.
Thank you.
Councillor Withy.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, first of all, thanks for the update. A lot of information, very much appreciated. I wasn't actually going to say anything, but it saves me an email if I can ask you here, actually, because I've had quite a few people come to me regarding lack of sort of what you consider basic services, or what used to be considered as basic services at local practices. And in terms of AFID, quite a few people asking me about why they're being sent to Inverurie to get blood tests, many of whom obviously can't get to Inverurie to get them. As Councillor Ross said, the issue with closing local hospitals is it puts the pressure on ARI, and I think the same if you can't get your blood tests and things like that, the basics or the services at your local practice, you go into Inverurie, you're then putting pressure on the Inverurie practice. So You may have already answered this, because the answer I normally get is resource, staffing, things like that as being the reasons that these services are being cut. So the question really, I guess, is what can we actually do to try and reinstate these services back locally? Because it is causing a lot of problems. As I say, it's not just the effect on individuals within the area that I represent, and I'm aware this is probably familiar to practices right across the country, actually. But it also has that knock-on effect on other practices and other communities as well, when people are being sent elsewhere, when you've literally got something, 2 minutes up the road, but it's unable to. And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm really just asking, what can we actually do to try and change that and get those services being delivered again at local level? And on a similar note, I'll be very brief, Chair, on a very similar note, in terms of face-to-face appointments, a lot of quite concerning cases have come to me over the last couple of years where, staff have done the best they can to offer advice and diagnosis over the phone, but as you know yourselves, it's not the same as examining someone in person. And I do think that the COVID days are long gone. We need to get back to face-to-face appointments. So same sort of question: what can we do? I guess staffing and resource are going to be the top answer, but what else can we do to try and get these things happening again? Thank you.
Who's going to answer that one?
I'll come in on that one, Chair. Yeah, so I suppose the direction in primary care for several years now has been through the primary care improvement plan, and it's about having that multidisciplinary approach to delivery of primary care and through GP practices and other resources. So we all recognise the pressures that we have on our GP practices and those primary care services, and I think we all acknowledge that, and it's a well-known factor. So what the primary care improvement plan did was to try and lessen that pressure by having multiple professionals who can support our GPs, to allow GPs to focus on what GPs do best. So I think as part of that, we, as you alluded to, Councillor Whitty, during COVID, we had a variety of digital and virtual contacts with patients, and that was necessary at the time. However, part of the direction that we've got is to try and lessen that pressure, to try and free up GP time to see patients that GPs really need to be seeing. That at times there will be a phone call, and at times there will be a video consultation, because actually that is it's for that clinician to make that decision about whether or not they need to see a patient in person to be able to offer advice, provide treatment, make an assessment. So that really sits within the clinician's professional judgment, and it's a part of that whole strategy of trying to alleviate pressure on primary care and allow GPs, free up GP time to do what GPs need to be doing. Your question about the bloods, and I absolutely agree. Our focus is on providing services as close to home as we possibly can. We've got, and that's sort of nationally driven, and we've also got all our home first elements and strategy that we're trying to put in place. I probably can't answer that specific question. I need to consult with some colleagues around that, around the detail of why they're not receiving their bloods at the GP practice and being asked to go to Inverurie. It could be, as you say, because that particular staff member is working in Inverurie and the bloods need to be taken there. Could be something to do with the type of the bloods and where the destination is. And who's actually asked for those bloods, whether it's consultant ARI or whether it's the GP practice. So probably, I know you said it would save you an email, but that you probably are going to have to email about the specifics around that, so I can speak to colleagues in primary care who will be able to give you a more eloquent answer than I can. Thank you.
Councillor Withy, did you want to come back in with a second question before I bring Councillor Ross back in briefly?
It was just to say thanks to Janine, and actually that I forgot. I actually should have said at the start that I did wonder whether you might need to go away and look into that issue over things like blood tests, because it initially it was just
one or two, but it just seems to be coming more and more. So if it's okay, Jeanine, I will email you and we'll take it from there off table. So much appreciated.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Ross, briefly, please, because time's marching on. You're on mute.
It's not often I speak to myself, but anyway, celebrating our community hospitals, I think, is really important. And a lot of our communities don't even realise what our community hospitals do. Would it be possible for us to have a briefing on the services that are provided by, I'm going to say, Aboyne and Glenaddee hospitals for councillors, but also for that to be publicised too, to be communicated via social media, so that our communities understand the diverse range of services provided by our community hospitals. Thank you.
Who can answer that?
I can come in on that one.
Yeah.
I don't see why we can't provide a briefing to councillors. I think that would we can do that, saying what services are provided from those particular hospitals. If people require those services, then they will be directed to them by whichever practitioner they're working with. So I'm not sure we'd be putting it on social media, but we can certainly provide it for councillors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I'm going to be really quick. I wonder what discussions you are having with housing around key workers and the allocations policies to help alleviate some of the pressures for finding accommodation for staff. And I think this comes really out of my concerns about the impact that the new Raymoy care home may have on our staffing levels up here. Very briefly, I also cannot stress enough the importance of Aboyne Hospital to up here. And finally, given the challenges that Allochburn faces, even more praise for the care that they give to the people who are resident there, because it really is a fantastic home. And please, can you pass that on? So I'll just leave those with you and shut up. Stephanie, did you want to come in?
I will, thank you. So I directly manage both Allochburn and Aboyne Hospital, so thank you for your comments, Councillor Blackett. They are very much well received, and I'll pass them on with the team. You mentioned their Raymoy Manor care home, so I have met with the care home manager on a couple of occasions now, and have been out to do a site visit to see the new care home, just as the keys were being handed over. So I have spoken very openly and candidly with the manager, Gail Duthie, about the potential impact it has on our wider health and social care system. With the opening of a new care home, it's a 60-bedded care home, so the staffing team that they require is extensive, as you will appreciate, for that many residents. Care Concern Group, who run the care home, have made a commitment not to employ multiple staff members from other health and social care resources within the local community, and they've had support under employment law from their HR departments to be able to do that. Because I did have concerns for them. If they had appropriate candidates, then employment law would stipulate what has to happen, but they're assured, and as a private agency, they have the right to make their own recruitment decisions. They have been able to recruit to start their soft launch for early September opening, and they have initial plans to open 2 of the 6 households with 5 residents in both households. So they'll have 10 residents for the week of opening. At the moment, we're not seeing an impact on our staffing within health and social care across Deeside, which is a relief and is a positive, that they are standing by that commitment that they have made to us, not to rob Peter to pay Paul, in effect, because great if we have a new care home, but what we don't want to do is destabilise what we already have in the market. So we are working very closely with them as a provider to welcome to the area, very much welcomed, but also not to destabilise our other resources that we have.
I did ask about the conversations that you might be having with the housing team about trying to get perhaps Janine, because actually Janine, you and I discussed this when you came out, the fact that, you know, key workers we don't have key workers on the allocations policy at the moment. And, you know, perhaps we should, you know, when you were here, we discussed the fact that Ballater used to have 2 care homes, now it's got none. And everything's moving further and further towards Aboyne, and of course that affects Strathdon as well. So perhaps you'd like to answer that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We do have a joint programme board with housing colleagues. I'm not on that board. It's my partnership manager colleague, Alex Purdy, who's partnership manager for North. So what I'll do is I'll speak to Alex and ask her about make her aware of the comment you've just raised, and see how we're working with council colleagues to support that. We did have conversations in the past around that, and we looked at various resources within our estate to see whether we could support some of that. That was during the sort of COVID period, when we were, you know, significantly struggling for staff resource, but that didn't really progress because of various reasons. But whether we can have any impact on the allocations process or not, I don't know that. That would be a matter for the council, but we can certainly ask the question. Thank you.
I think we can, you know, slightly put pressure on here when the allocations policy comes back, because it will come back to Communities Committee at some stage. So if we're all working on it from both angles, we might get some success. And of course, communities can have local lettings initiatives, and if they're aware of the fact that they need key workers to be in on that. So when the Grampian housing was done at the school in Ballater, they have a local lettings initiative, and so if you can get that built in, that might help alleviate. I'll leave it there, and I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much for coming along, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Right, we now move on to item number 12, and we lose Councillor Petrie. Bye. Right, Cheryl, are you still here? Cheryl, hello. Right.
Apologies, Chair. Apologies.
No, that's fine. That's fine. This is the Huntly Conservation Area Boundary Review, and we are recommended to note the outcome of the public consultation, note the revised Huntly Conservation Area boundary, note the revised Huntly Conservation Area Management Plan, note the revised Huntly Conservation Area Appraisal, and note that authority to vary the boundary of a conservation area is delegated to the head of planning and economy. So let me hand over to you, Cheryl.
That's great. Thank you, Chair. So yes, I'm here to present the Huntly Conservation Area Boundary Review, and this boundary review was brought forward after a request from the Marr Area Committee in February 2023. So the members asked us to undertake a full review of the Huntly Conservation Area, and now that review is being completed, including a public consultation, and members are being asked to note the outcome of that process, the amended boundary and the associated documents, as you've already suggested. So before discussing the revised boundary itself, I think it's quite important to remind ourselves what the role of the planning authority is in relation to conservation areas. So conservation areas are not simply a local planning designation. They form part of a national framework established through the Planning, Listability and Conservation Area Scotland Act. This legislation requires planning authorities to identify areas of special architectural or historic interest where it's desirable to preserve or enhance that character. And what this means is the conservation areas are part of a long-term national objective to protect and enhance Scotland's historic environment. As planning authorities, we have a statutory duty to assess and manage these areas in a consistent manner and in accordance with national criteria. And the Scottish Government also recognises the economic, social, environmental and regeneration benefits that our historic environment can bring, and some of those have been highlighted in the report. So Huntly's been a conservation area since 1975, and over that time the boundary has evolved, which has reflected both changes in the town, but also changes in our understanding of its heritage significance. The current review was undertaken directly in response to requests from both committee and the wider community that the extent of the designation be reconsidered. So the Planning Authority therefore undertook this detailed review of that 2013 boundary, and this included a walkover survey, a professional assessment by the Historic Environment team, and a public consultation held between November 2025 and March 2026. So although public consultation is not a statutory requirement for a boundary revision, it's always been best practice within our team to make sure that we do seek community comments and try and incorporate those views into the process where we can. So the consultation demonstrated that there's a very broad spectrum of opinion in Huntly and that regards the future of the conservation area. So for those who did respond, you'll be able to see all of the detailed analysis within the report. But to give an overview, just under 57% had a positive feeling towards the proposal, just under 41% disagreed with the proposal, and just over 3% didn't know or had a more neutral stance towards it. And then when we looked within that in terms of the comments that were given, there was just over 9% felt that the conservation area should be removed completely. Just over 27% felt it should be restricted to the square. Just over under 41% agreed but suggested further inclusions within the boundary, and then just under 23% provided no additional comment. So what this demonstrates is that there's no single consensus view within the community, but there is more of a favourable swing towards retaining the conservation area but looking at a boundary reduction. So the role of the Planning Authority is therefore not simply to choose one side or another, but to balance community views against our statutory function and make a professional assessment of the town's architectural and historic significance. As part of the review, every street and area within the existing conservation area was assessed against the recognised national criteria, which is also included in the report. And we tried to remove those areas of modern development or areas where the historic character has been eroded, or where there was an unnecessary overlap with other heritage designations. And when we could see that, we would try and remove those places. It remains the professional view of the Planning Authority that the 2013 boundary included areas that did possess architectural or historic interest. However, we have listened carefully to the concerns expressed by members here and also the community regarding the extent of the designation. And as a result, we have revised that boundary and removed areas of lesser significance. I would like to draw members' attention to the scale of the reduction. So there is currently 1,277 individual addresses, and under the revised boundary, we've removed 547 addresses from the designation, and that represents a 43% reduction in the numbers of the properties affected by the designation. So it's not simply a minor adjustment, it's quite a substantial reduction and demonstrates that officers have listened carefully to concerns raised through that review process. It also represents what we believe is the greatest reduction that can be achieved, while still ensuring that those areas that do meet that national criteria remain protected. So just to go through a number of the concerns that were kind of regularly raised through that consultation process. So one reoccurring concern related to replacement windows, energy efficiency improvements and renewable technologies. So members may be aware already that the planning framework has changed quite significantly in recent years, and this was an issue not just restricted to Huntly. So in terms of permitted development, they have been expanded, and many of the works that historically required permission no longer do so. So the report notes that replacement UPVC windows within non-listed buildings can now be acceptable under the prior notification arrangements. And there's also significantly greater flexibility around micro-renewables, air source heat pumps within conservation areas than previously was the case. It's also important to reiterate that like-for-like repair and maintenance remains permitted development, and many internal alterations, such as thermal improvement measures, don't require planning permission in a non-listed property. So I'd just like to briefly draw together some of the key points before I finish off. So the review that we've undertaken has all been about balance. We've tried to listen carefully to the committee and to the community, and we have resulted in a significant reduction in the designation, so that 43% of properties being removed. At the same time, we must remember that conservation areas are not simply a local policy choice. The planning authority has a statutory duty to identify and protect areas of architectural and historic interest and to apply those national criteria consistently across our area. Our role, therefore, is to balance views with our professional responsibility and wider objectives of the planning system. The consultation showed a very broad spread of opinion. There's no single consensus view on the extent, but the broad support for retaining the conservation area. The revised boundary, therefore, seeks to strike a balance and proportionate balance between those differing opinions and that of professional assessment. Permitted development rights have been significantly expanded, so issues that were frequently raised during consultation, such as replacement windows, thermal upgrades and micro-renewables, are now subject to much more flexible regulatory framework. So a further message we heard quite clearly through the consultation was that people don't fully understand what is and what is not acceptable, and we accept that criticism. So the Historic Environment team have begun work on an improvement project to review how we present guidance to residents and property owners, with a focus on making it clear, accessible and easier to navigate, and trying to move away from these lengthy technical documents where possible. And that improvement project will be running over the next 12 months. So ultimately, conservation areas remain an important part of Scotland's long-term approach to protecting and enhancing historic places. They support local identity, heritage-led regeneration, tourism, investment opportunities and access to funding, whilst helping ensure that the change is managed sensitively. We therefore hope that members understand the rationale behind the recommendation before them and view the significantly reduced boundary as a positive step forward. It responds to community feedback, removes a substantial number of properties from the designation and retains the protection only where offers feel it's justified against that national criteria. So accordingly, we ask the committee to note the consultation findings, the revised boundary, the updated management plan and appraisal, so that we can move forward to the next steps where the officers will notify Scottish ministers and Historic Environment Scotland. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass back to you, Chair, and obviously happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, and you summed up what we've got to do absolutely brilliantly for me. Any questions, committee? Councillor Goodall.
Yeah, good report, well put together. And as I said earlier, I love the historic context that you put in the report. Huntly's a beautiful place, and I won't go into that just now. But anyway, questions. On page 227 2.5, we specifically requested two things. One, that the boundary should be restricted to, as indicated in 2.5, Chapel Street, West Park Street, East Park Street, etc. And also to look at funding available to assist those in the conservation area. Now, the first question is, one, could you explain why that wasn't considered, the change to the boundary that this committee wanted? And two, the funding that you have indicated in the papers seems to be for groups. It doesn't seem to be for individuals. Could you explain could you go into more depth as to whether there is funding for individuals or whether it is just for groups? Thank you.
Thanks very much for your question. So I suppose in terms of the request to keep the conservation area to that kind of smaller area that was defined by yourselves within that section 2.5. So when we undertake the conservation area reviews, we have a process to go through, which is called a townscape appraisal. And that is set at the national guidance, which is the PAN 74. And we have to go through, and because our role, our statutory duty is to identify the areas that are of special architectural and historic interest. So when we look at it, that's automatically what we will do. When we review it, obviously we get consultation comments and we get comments from committee, and we will look through those and think about whether or not we can take on board those comments, whether it is still you know, if we take an area out, are we taking it out because somebody told us to, or are we taking out because it's no longer a special architectural interest? And so when we looked at the suggested boundary by committee, what we felt was that actually it removes an awful lot of Huntley, which does fit that national criteria for that designation. And then obviously we also go out and speak to the public about what their perception is. And again, although we have mixed views, we also have people that are suggesting like broader conservation area boundaries to us. So I think that's why we always have to pull it back. You know, what's the townscape appraisal? What's important about Huntley, and what does fit that national criteria, and therefore is professionally competent to make sure that you do include within that boundary. So hopefully that answers that section, but I don't want members to feel that we discount your opinion, or we don't listen to it, or we set it aside. It does form part of our judgment in the same way that all public consultations comments do. So then in terms of the funding, so the funding landscape for the historic environment changes regularly. And so we can only identify the kind of high level funders that are available to people. And a lot of them are available to groups, like funding within the historic environment is limited, and therefore they tend to look for group related ones that are based on kind of a strategic or a really economic benefit or a real community driven. Historic Environment Scotland are probably the funder that would give more to individuals. But again, they do tend to look for that community benefit, like what's the wider benefit of putting in funding to particularly individual properties. So yeah, we've obviously covered off the ones that we're aware of at the minute, the ones that they know that they can approach. But like I say, the funding landscape does change regularly. So it's always best to like review it again at the point where you need to find funding. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I call in Councillor Withy, at the end of this paper, I'm going to give everybody a break just so that everybody knows. Councillor Withy.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few points to make, but I will ask them as questions, because one of the things I did think was quite surprising when this paper come forward is that we're being asked to note. We're not actually being asked to comment. Now, by the very existence of it on the agenda, we have noted it. Doesn't mean we have commented or even agreed to it. So I just wanted to add that in, because normally we are asked to comment as well as note, and we're not being asked to. But I will try and make my comments as questions. As a result of that, the first thing I wanted to point out, I mean, Cheryl, when you presented the paper, you said there that 57% of people responded agreed with what was being proposed. I think consultations are often in the wording, and you're not incorrect that 57% of people did respond positively, but that is not saying that they agreed. Actually, when you look at the breakdown, 36% of people agreed to what was being proposed, 20% of people said they somewhat agree. Now, as to why that needed to be in there, somewhat agree, I don't know. But that's what gets you to the 57%. If you actually look at the single breakdown of percentage of responses, the biggest single percentage is 40% of people that disagree with it. And my understanding is that they've disagreed because they would prefer the conservation area to cover the square only, which from memory is what ward members also unanimously said would be our preference. So I just wanted, by way of a question, if it's possible for you to just to confirm that actually 57% is right, positive, but that doesn't mean 57% agreed to it. It was actually far less than that. And again, going back to why my query over why we're being asked to note and not comment, as you said, you know, you do want our comments from us. I just feel that as it stands at the moment, the service is going in a different direction to what ward members have said they preferred, and what the overwhelming majority, if you break the figures down, say they prefer within Huntley itself. My preference would be that I would actually request that we look at it again to back to what we discussed back in 2023, which was to have the conservation area cover the square only. But the question I'm going to ask is, how do we do that? Because we are being asked to note, not comment, not agree to, or anything else. So how do councillors representing the majority of the people in Huntley that disagree with what's proposed go about ensuring that we look at this again? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I suppose firstly, just to go back to the figures for section 2.10 of the report. So that's why we break it down into the second element in terms of people who agree, people who somewhat agree. And within that somewhat agree, it broke down to people who wanted it just to be the square, but there was also people that asked for additional inclusions within that boundary as well. So the point within the report was that actually keeping a conservation area was more positive than not having a conservation area at all. But then within that, that is broken down to people who just wanted it to be this square, but that was only 27.27%. Whereas there were people that agreed with the revision as we presented it, which is the 20.45. And there was also people who agreed with it with a request for additional inclusions. So actually the balance of favour is there wasn't an overwhelming majority of people that felt that they did just want that incredibly tight boundary. And I suppose in terms of your second point, is in terms of the decision making, and like I said in my presentation, one of the issues with conservation areas is that they are a national policy, they are a national strategy in terms of protecting the historic environment, and that's why it's delegated to the head of planning to make sure that it is a professional assessment in terms of what are the significant parts of Scotland, significant parts of Aberdeenshire that should be protected for future generations, and so that those decisions don't become, you don't have one area that has lots of conservation areas and you have one area that has nothing. And therefore you don't get those positive outcomes of having conservation areas and having your heritage protected, which is bringing economic prosperity to Scotland and is ensuring that those areas start to move in a positive direction, both economically, socially, and in terms of regeneration. So in terms of this committee being able to make a decision about whether the conservation area goes down to that smaller area, that's not within the remit of an area committee to make that decision. And I'll maybe bring in legal if I can, because as far as my understanding is, there is not an avenue for that to happen, because the area as proposed is the area that meets the criteria, and therefore that is the area that should be designated. So Jill, I don't know if you have anything further to add?
Thank you. I don't think I would have anything else to add. Just looking at 5.2, it is it's the head of planning and economy that's got the delegated authority to designate, de-designate and vary the conservation area.
Thank you.
I think that answers it. So we'll move on to Councillor Turvey.
Could I come back in, please, Chair, briefly?
Yeah, sorry, your hands up at number 3. All right, quickly.
Oh no, I'm happy to come back in later.
No, come back in.
It was just so that Cheryl can get me out of the way.
Yeah.
Before I annoy it too much, because no, I do understand where you're coming from. I just think there's some important points. Is the reason why I wanted to come back in, Chair, because as Cheryl has explained, this is a decision that is being made by officers. Now, for us local ward members who have to go to Huntley next week and explain to constituents that this came to committee. We were not asked to make a decision. We were not asked to comment. We were not asked to even endorse it. We were simply asked to note. The decision has not been made by elected members. It's been made by officers. And I want to make that clear because it will be us that gets it in the neck by the majority of people who don't actually support what we're doing here. And I do agree with Cheryl. The most people I think do want the conservation area. The highest amount individually seem to suggest a square only, but as you say, Cheryl, there are loads of other little bits and pieces, options, inclusions, exclusions, which is why I wonder whether it should be visited. But what we got in front of us on paper now suggests that the majority want it to just be the square, and that is backed up by ward members. So I just think it's important to make those points because we will get it in the next. It's not our decision. we, in my view, me personally, are against this. I would request that we change it, but I've been told I can't do that, so that's absolutely fair enough. But I do disagree as well with some of the reasons given with terms of economic growth, prosperity. I think the people at Huntley, particularly those in the conservation area, will say that the conservation area has just as much negative impact on their ability to grow the town as it does positive. So again, as a word I used earlier on, it's subjective. But I'll leave it there. I just wanted to be clear because I will get it in the neck, as I'm sure other ward colleagues will. But this is not our decision. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
I wonder if Tim wants to come in as area manager. He hasn't stuck his hand up, but given that it is a decision that, you know, all we're being asked to do is note it. And I do think Councillor Withy has quite a point.
I hadn't put my hand up, Chair, and I wasn't planning to come in. I was enjoying listening to the debate. As you've asked, I mean, an observation I'd make is I do understand the point that Councillor Withy is making. However, what I would highlight is that I think the point that Cheryl's making is officers are balancing a national mandate to look at national policy, as well as making sure that they take into account the views of local people, which I believe, sitting outside, they appear to have done. I wouldn't necessarily agree that this is outright something that members claim is a decision not made by them. I think this has been influenced very much by, if you like, the views of local members and local people as part of the conservation. And I think the conservation team have done as best as they can. And I think Cheryl's outlined all those points. It is true that you are being asked to note it, but I think the context of members being asked to note it is you have an understanding of all the inputs that have gone into what is likely to influence the decision of the head of planning. And I think in terms of perhaps giving members some advice in terms of how they may explain that to constituents, I think they can reassure constituents that whilst, if you'll excuse the expression, you know, you can never please everyone all of the time. Officers have taken on board both the views of local members and the views of individuals. Cheryl's very clearly outlined that there's been lots of different opinions. There isn't one single opinion. I take on board Councillor Withy's point that you can look at the data and you can look at sort of what the majority of people have said and ways of interpreting it. But what members can take away is there's been a significant amount of input taken from both ward members and from the engagement that's gone on, and that will be reflected in any eventual decision. But yes, it is entirely true that members are being asked to note this rather than make a decision, but that's because in many respects a lot of their comments have already been taken on board. Apologies, I've probably said too much. Hopefully that's not too far off the mark, Cheryl.
I'll bring Cheryl back in before going to Councillor Turvey.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would like to say is that if it hadn't been for members here and also the community, we wouldn't have reduced the boundary at all. There is some merit in the 2013 boundary in terms of that national criteria. So I know that we haven't gone as far as members and some members of the public would have liked, but we have tried to take it as far down as we possibly can. So yeah, I wouldn't. And the other point about bringing it to committee and being noted is we could in theory not come to committee, but I don't feel that it's the right thing to do. You know, we have gone to public consultation, we have spoken to people, and I think it's important that the committee that are involved in Huntley are aware of the decisions which will impact on our constituents. So although the decision is delegated to head of planning, I really think it's important that you're informed and kept up to date with what's gone on in that process.
Councillor Turvey.
Yeah, I was coming to just to say, no, not just to say, but I really did enjoy to read all the report and the presentation, you know, the survey. The time they spent to do that is just amazing. And, you know, there's historical of it and things like that. And I understand, Councillor with his, you know, concerns, like, you know, what are we going to feedback to our residents when actually they feel like we should represent them. And then, as you explained here just right now, I think that's the most important. If it was not for the people and the elected members, we will not have changed anything. So I think that's resume very well the situation. It's like we did listen to you. We did a survey. We consulted, and we actually make differences and they made some changes. So, and most likely, more than things is like I upload the changes for helping toward the renewables and installation of alternative heating systems and things like that. So installation, all that. I think that's in today's system, which those should be embraced because those are removable as well. If changes have to be made, it's not something that's done and lasts forever. For 100 years, like all the buildings are themselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're now on to Councillor Ross.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. And one of my questions has been answered by Cheryl as to why this paper, because I was going to ask why has this paper come to committee when it's only for noting, and I appreciate that you have made the effort to bring it to committee, given the decisions are going to be made by the head of planning. However, I do support and endorse what Councillor Withy has said regarding this, and I appreciate the scheme of governance, and we have to abide by the explanations that have been given. But I do wonder if a motion, and I'm going to be shut down here, I would imagine, and told no, if a motion could be raised asking, changing the recommendations so that councillors can comment on this paper at least, because I think local democracy is very, very important. I appreciate that you have listened to what the councillors have said. You've listened to what the results of the survey have said, but I do think that given that it's come to committee, and I appreciate you've brought it to committee and you felt that was right, and I thank you for that. I do feel that the committee should have been allowed to at least comment on this. And this isn't anything to do with Cheryl or area manager. It's just a principle. I feel local democracy, we have local elected members. They've put their views forward, but they should be able to comment on this paper before it goes to committee. So can a motion be moved to change the recommendations that is the case, or am I completely out with the scheme of governance and it's not allowed?
Well,
thank you.
What comments are you going to make that's going to change anything?
Well,
for a start,
for a start, I would like local members' views to be, if they have a different view, I would like them to be able to comment that they have, and for it to be noted for when this paper goes on up to the head of planning or whatever, that their views have not been, their views have been heard. I accept that and have been taken on board, but I just feel that noting is not sufficient. I really don't think it's enough, given that we're a committee of elected members. I just don't feel, I'm not happy with this at all.
Tim, do you want to come in, or Jill, one of you?
If I can come in first, but Jill may wish to come in after me. I mean, what I would say from a practical perspective is obviously any comments that members make, irrespective of the recommendation, will be minuted and will be passed on. So from a practical perspective, we are listening to the debate from members and taking on board the points. So that will be passed across to Paul Macari. I think Councillor Ross, yes, I would probably agree with your first comment that I don't think it would be competent to put a motion to change anything because it is a report for noting. What I would perhaps defend officers is that the reason I think Cheryl's wanted to come here today is as much to ensure that members here have all the information they need when they're dealing with a constituent so they can understand the process. That said, I think we as officers do understand the frustration that members feel when they've got a report that they can't actually influence. I would suggest that the most practical way forward is to take some reassurance that we will be making those comments. We will take those comments down, they will be minuted, and although this is just for noting, those comments will be passed to the Paul Macari. Jill, I don't know if you wanted to come in from a more specific governance perspective.
Thank you. No, I would agree with what you've just said. I don't think that the recommendation should be changed. I think on the basis of the scheme of governance, it's more appropriate to keep them as noting. But as you've said, Tim, any of the questions and the responses that will be noted in the minute, which is a public record. I don't know if Cheryl wants to also to add further.
Yeah,
Chair.
please come in, Cheryl.
Thank you, Chair. The only additional thing that I thought could be a possibility is we could create an appendix within either the management, well, probably the management plan would be the best place to capture the views of, in the same way that we have the survey responses for the community, we could create an appendix that had the feelings of the committee so that that's within the management plan, so it would be under consideration. It's out there in the public domain and it forms part of future thought processes. I don't know if that would be of any interest.
So would councillors agree to that? Can I have a hands up if you agree?
Not until I've discussed it fully.
I was going to say I don't agree at the moment, no. And if I'm allowed back in later, Chair, I'll explain why. Thanks.
Well, I think come back in now.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the reason I don't agree, and I appreciate the sentiment, Cheryl, but the reason I don't agree is because we don't need an appendix. Councillors were asked their views 3 years ago, and we gave you our views 3 years ago. And I'm not saying they weren't listened to, but we've gone the opposite way to what councillors said. So I don't see the point in putting it in an appendix now that we're being asked simply to note a decision that's being made elsewhere, because it effectively has nothing to do with us, which is why I differ a lot to other people in the fact it comes here. I do appreciate you giving us the information, as Councillor Ross said, but that could have been done in a briefing, though. I personally feel like the fact it's come to committee leads the public to believe that their elected members made the decision, and it's been hung around our neck. It wasn't us that made this decision. We were asked our views already. They were included in the report when the petition first came to us 3 years ago. And I know Tim mentioned that we've had the chance to influence it. I don't agree we have. I think we were listened to 3 years ago. There's our views, but they haven't influenced it in the same way that 27% of people that agreed with us appear not to. So I don't want to fall out with anyone, but I'm just trying to make it crystal clear that I think adding it as appendix now just adds more confusion to who actually made this decision. Bringing it to committee, in my opinion, has already caused confusion because effectively what we're being told is it has nothing to do with us. I don't agree with that personally. I think a decision as important as this should be made by elected members, but that's just my views, which is why I don't agree to including it as an appendix. Thank you.
Right, I'll bring in Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. When I brought this to the committee, when I suggested the square, it was with the backing of most of the people of Huntly. Since then, we've had Cheryl's work, and it's good work, and I appreciate what she's done, and I appreciate the limits to what she can and cannot do. That said, we are the politicians, we are the voice of Huntly, and that's why we are saying what we are saying, and I fully support what Robbie has said and what Anne has said. When the consultation went out, people were never asked about the square. That wasn't a question that was asked. I did ask, when I realised that, I asked, as Tim and yourself know, Cheryl, I asked the question. 80% of my respondents wanted the square only. 20% wanted the proposed area. And that's from local knowledge and from factual conversations that I have had with the people of Huntly. Only up until today, we were not aware, or rather not today, up until Thursday when we really got the papers for this committee, did we then realise it was for noting only. Up until that point, we believed, and the people of Huntly believed, that the decision would be ours. The decision would be ours to make over the extent of the conservation area, and we have been proven wrong. And that goes against, in my view, the democratic principle, because there is no direct benefit to the people of Huntly for having any extended area. They want the square. They want their square to be protected. They love their town. They adore their town, they respect its buildings, they respect everything about Huntly, and they are 100% for Huntly. And when this gets out, we are going to get it in the neck. So I don't know where we go from here. I have a question for legal, and that is, if we do not note it, if we refuse to note certain aspects of this paper, can that then be recorded? Because if we only note public consultation and we refuse to note the rest, can we do so? Because that will give a stronger message to the people of Huntly and also to officers that we are not happy. Thank you.
Jill.
Thank you. I think maybe one point I would just like to make is that councillors would have agreed the scheme of governance, which has this delegation in it. So, you know, this, I'm not exactly sure how long, you know, I assume it's been in for quite a while, but, you know, it was councillors that approved the scheme of delegation of all the officer powers. So, you know, that's not changed. So that, you know, that is part of the scheme of governance. In relation to your question, I would need to maybe have an adjournment to have a think about that. I'm not sure if that would be competent.
Can I ask, should we be deferring this?
Chair, if I may, I do have a suggestion that I was just going to run by Jill in line really with what Jeff was saying that might be competent. I didn't have a chance to check it fully, but if you're interested.
Well, hang on, let me bring the area manager in first and get the officers' views, and then you can come back on that.
I would probably, I mean, a couple of comments I would make. I would probably reiterate what Jill has said, is that in terms of decision-making powers, you know, the scheme of governance has been agreed by members and full council. I would probably repeat what I said earlier in terms of the fact that the scheme of delegation, as well as cross-matched with national imperatives, which members have to take on board, has led to the recommendation, the process in front of you. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with the direction of travel that members want to, if I'm picking this up correctly, sort of put something down that says, A, they're not happy, which I have no problem with because that can go in a minute and that the comments can be passed across. But in terms of decision-making powers, I think it's always been clear that it has been an officer decision and that there is an influence from members, but equally the one thing that members, you know, never have the ability to do is to override national imperatives and legislation. That's simply not an option that's ever been on the table, and I think Cheryl's articulated that what members articulated a wish for in terms of just the square was never realistically on the table. That's out with officers' hands. So I think I would probably come back to the point that Jill's made, is that the scheme of delegation has been agreed by members. I think I would come back to the point that Cheryl's made, is that the change to the conservation has been very much influenced by input that's been put in by members and through the engagement with the general public. And it's probably fair to say that what's been proposed has very much taken on board that direction of travel in as much as it's possible to do so. I wouldn't necessarily see a value in deferring anything from this stage, because realistically, there's nothing that I've heard that means we're outside of the scheme of governance. I do understand, and I do understand why the irritation from members. I'd perhaps reiterate again that a key purpose of the report is not to annoy members, it is to ensure members have a full understanding of the process that's been undertaken, which I think will be helpful in terms of explaining to people a level of detail in terms of how how an eventual decision is come to. I would perhaps come back to, you know, again reiterate that the comments that members have made and their dissatisfaction will be passed across as part of the minute, but I wouldn't necessarily see any value in deferring for another time, because I'm not aware of any part of governance that will allow that will allow members to make a decision that's not in line with national legislation. Apologies if I'm not saying anything that members want to hear.
Okay, Councillor Ross.
Can I go to the back of the queue, because I'm not a local member? I'd like to come in after Councillor Withy, please, and then I'll say what I think. You're muted, sorry, Chair.
Put your hand down and put it up again.
Okay,
and that'll put you to the end.
I don't mind being last.
Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if we are out with the terms of governance. I know that we are, as far as Edinburgh, as far as national governance is concerned, or national policy, that's a different matter. But I'm not sure that on this occasion we are out with the scheme of governance. And this, in other words, this is only an operational matter. It's not. It cannot be an operational matter, in my belief, because of the scope of what we're trying to do and the effect that scope will have on local residents. I just wonder though, if we defer this, can we defer it to discussions between Paul McCarry and local members so that we can thoroughly explore all avenues? Because I'm not keen that this goes forward in its current form. And I still go back to my point. If we do not note what then happens, probably nothing, but it's a stronger message than doing nothing. Thank you.
Tim.
I was going to say, Chair, I am quite happy, and I'm sure between myself and Cheryl, we would be happy to speak to Paul to relay to him, the strength of feeling from either committee members or ward members, if that's the wish of the committee. And I'm sure there would be an opportunity to speak to him direct about those issues. And it may be actually better to do that out with the committee.
So
can I come back on that? I think that the people of Huntly feel so strongly about this that if it's just an open and shut case and we finish this today, Huntly will not be a good place for the next wee while. We know, Tim, from what we had with the lampposts and various other situations at Huntly, how volatile they can be and how strongly they feel things. So we have to be careful, and we have to allow the people of Huntly to digest what we are offering them or not offering them. So I would suggest strongly that we defer it for discussions between Paul McCarry and ward members.
Cheryl.
It was just to bring in that in terms of the consultation, that the views were very mixed across Huntly. So there may be a strong core of people that would like to see it reduced to the square, but that is not what came across strongly in the consultation. And we can't set aside the opinions of people who either agreed with the boundary or agreed with it with inclusions, because their view is just as significant. And some people went into quite a lot of detail about why they felt areas should be included, as well as the ones that said would be excluded. So it's just to make sure that when we're representing the community's views as they gave it as part of this consultation process, it was mixed.
And the papers
Can I
have
come
been
back on that, please,
online.
Jiva?
Yeah, the papers have been online for a week for people to look at.
Yeah,
Well,
let
first
Jeff
of all,
finish. Let Jeff finish.
What I would say is 44 people responded. And I'm talking about literally hundreds of people wouldn't take part because they believed that what would happen is what has happened and that their views would not be considered. And that's why I went round to people of Huntly and asked for their views. And please believe me, 80% of them wanted the square and 20% wanted what has been offered. Those are the facts on the ground, and that's from local knowledge. And I understand I understand the figures that we have in front of us, but it's 44 people out of 4,000 people.
Yeah, but if you don't respond, it's like if you don't vote.
I know,
you get the government
knowing
anyway.
the people of Huntly as I do, I understand them and understand why they've taken the views that they have, and that's why I went and asked them myself.
Right. Robbie's been waiting a while. Can we listen to what Robbie has to say to him and then come to you? And then if Anne doesn't mind being end of the queue to her.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, just to follow what Councillor Goodall said, absolutely spot on. We're talking about percentages of people that agreed, disagreed, or whatever, based on a very few people that responded to the official consultation. And the reason why many didn't is for the reasons Jeff has absolutely given. And I know what Jeff's saying is factual, because when I've gone to ask the people in Huntley, the majority of them have said, I've already spoke to Councillor Goodall and this is what I've told him. So he's absolutely correct in what he's saying. The local knowledge on the ground is very different to the very small amount of feedback we've had on the consultation, and he's put across very well the reasons why it's such a small amount. To move on to the discussion over the noting and perhaps a meeting with Paul to relay our feelings, I go back to what I said. We relayed our feelings 3 years ago at the very beginning of this process, so I do not see the point in meeting to relay them now. I feel like I've been ignored the first time, so I don't see why I'm going to be listened to the next time around. So I don't see that as being an option, although I do agree with deferring it. I've said before at committees, and I said right at the start of this paper, the problem when we're asked to note a paper is by the very fact it's on the agenda, we are technically noting it. So there's not much we can really do about that. But what I would perhaps propose as an amendment and seek some advice from Jill on here is that we add an additional recommendation to say, yes, we've noted it. We don't agree with it. We would like to defer this whilst we request a review of the scheme of governance. That, I feel, ticks every box, because we're being told that it's a governance that's stopping us from preventing this from going forward. Well, let's defer this and request a review of the scheme of governance and then come back to it. Now, you're shaking your head, Chair. It may well be that our request for a review of the scheme of governance is rejected, but we can ask. As far as I've checked, that's competent as an amendment, but Jill will probably tell me otherwise in a moment and I'll have to go and rethink again. But I don't see what we can do in terms of noting, because the fact it's here and we're discussing it means we've noted it. But if we can defer it on the basis that we request a review of the scheme of governance so that the delegated decisions can be reviewed as to whether they should be delegated or should be made by local members, and we come back to it after that. As I say, that request might be rejected, but that's for another day. For now, I don't see why we can't add that as an additional recommendation.
Well, I'm shaking my head because I'm not sure that you can get a review of the scheme of governance just by asking.
I believe we did a very similar thing on Tully Nestle School. I'm only thinking of local ones here. The others might have other examples, but certainly on Tully Nestle School, I think we were unable to do anything at the time, but we did request a review of the scheme of governance and the delegated powers, which, as you know, has since resulted in a change of policy. Now, it was too late for Tully Nestle School because it came after we agreed to note papers. If we do it now, before we note the paper and send it off, I can't see why we can't follow that route.
Tim.
Apologies, Chair. I'm probably not going to make myself popular, but I have to say, as your area manager, have grave concerns. I think a lot of the arguments being put forward are being predicated on the fact that members are simply not believing the engagement and consultations that have been put forward on the basis that there are alternative consultations out there. I think what I'm obliged to highlight is that an appropriate engagement has been carried out by Cheryl and her team, which is in line with appropriate guidance. And the results of that have been put in front of you today. I would absolutely endorse what Cheryl said, that it shows a range of opinions. And I think, we're in very dangerous territory if we're basing recommendations or basing potential actions, for example, looking at changing the governance, on a perception that people are simply not believing or not wanting to accept the officer interpretation or the validity of that engagement because they've undertaken or because of an awareness of what they perceive to be other views. I think that's extraordinarily dangerous territory to be in, and I would caution members of going down that route. The reality is that the report is highlighting, what officers propose based on an engagement, and I'm not sure some of the comments are fair about that engagement. And I'm not sure that you can suggest or recommend actions or alternative actions other than raising concerns based on the fact that essentially you perceive that there is no validity in that engagement. I think I would have to caution you against that.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you. And nobody is, I would like to emphasise, nobody is criticising or saying they don't believe officers or the advice that we're given. That is not what we're saying. I've got the scheme of governance up and looking at B area committees and one at administrative and general. And okay, it's not the bit about planning, but it says here that 1.2 to consider, comment on, make recommendations to services and any other appropriate committee on any matter or policy which impacts its area. Now, to me, this is a matter and it impacts the area. So I completely endorse what Councillor Withy is requesting. I would second him, but I am not, I want to emphasise, criticising officers or in any way whatsoever, or not believing officers in any way. That has to be emphasised because I most certainly am not. I value the advice that we get from officers. I may have a different opinion to officers, but that does not mean I don't believe or have listened to the advice I'm not criticising officers either, but I fully endorse what Councillor Withy has said, and I would second his amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Withy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back in briefly to, I mean, first of all, basically going to say what Councillor Ross has just said. I don't want any of my comments to be taken by any individual officer as any kind of attack or slant on them. I think it's important from all that I've just said that I also clarify publicly that officers are simply following the process that they've been given to follow and the policies that they've been given to follow, which is why I've suggested a review of delegated powers and scheme of governance, because officers are following what they've been told to follow. They're doing what they've been asked to do. So it's absolutely nothing against them. It's about the process that we, as I think one officer said, we actually agreed to way back that some of us have been campaigning to review for a very long time. But I do take aboard what Tim says about going down a dangerous path with things like this. But I also think we're going down a very dangerous path when you have a unanimous decision or a unanimous opinion from elected representatives that does match what the public have said. Now, regardless of what we've heard at ground level, what's included in the report is crystal clear. 27% of people support it being in the square, the single most percentage for any single option. 40% disagree with what is being proposed in front of them. The biggest percentage of respondents overall. So it's not just what we're hearing on the ground. It is there in the report if you dig down and break the figures down. But as I say, it's not against officers, it's against the process. Officers should not be put in a position to make these decisions on our behalf, is my opinion to begin with. We should be making these decisions. And that's why I'm trying to test the water by saying, let's defer this. Let's request a review of the scheme of governance and delegated powers and see where that takes us. Fully understanding that we might not get there, but let's try it because I do feel it's our job to do so. This is not going to be a democratic decision otherwise. You know, we were elected to make the decisions, not to just note them.
Can I just caution you in saying it's a unanimous view of the committee, because we haven't.
Sorry, I didn't, Chair. I didn't, Chair. I said ward members.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I've not contributed to the discussion, but I'm very confused as to where we're at and what's being proposed here and the grounds of what's being proposed here. I mean, Procedures Committee is the basis for reviewing that, and then it goes through full council. And I think Councillor Withy's proposing something that has significant consequences greater than what's in front of us. And I note Tim's caution urged here. So I'm not sure where committee are going with what's in front of us or the decision or the amendments here. And I would really appreciate some clarity or, you know, a break or something to understand the polarizing views that seem to be shared and legalities of where we're at and what's being asked here, because I'm finding myself feeling quite uncomfortable about this.
Right, I'm going to bring Tim back in because I'm feeling quite uncomfortable. I'm quite uncomfortable going against the scheme of delegation that we've all signed up to. I accept that Councillor Withy says that it can be changed. but I don't see that it can be changed retrospectively. So, and I'm uncomfortable perhaps at
Sorry to
deferring it.
interrupt,
I
Chair.
don't know.
It's not retrospectively. We haven't agreed it yet.
Right. Jill's got her hand up. She's the lawyer.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was just to say that, you know, it's quite a long, well, from my understanding, you know, it's quite a long process to change the scheme of governance. You know, it has to go through the procedures committee. I think it has to go to full council twice. You know, it has to go through numerous officers. So, you know, it could take a long time. And yeah, I think it may be useful to sort of see where we're going here, and yeah, possibly getting an adjournment so we can have a discussion on this.
So sorry, Jill, are you suggesting that we do actually defer this now?
No, sorry, excuse me. No, I would just maybe have just today, yeah, just possibly, you know, once we're clear, you know, I'm just maybe going to look into what we can actually do here, because, you know, there's quite a lot of things being said, or, you know, quite significant suggestions as well being made. But, you know, perhaps we can hear from all members first.
Well, we've been round and round and round, and it's, you know, we've been at this for over an hour. I'm just wondering if we have a vote. And, you know, I mean, I'm going to suggest that we make comments on the minutes and then have a discussion between Paul and the ward members. But others may disagree with that. I just see this going round and round and round. So I'm going to put that forward. Come in, Councillor Goodall.
Now, before you do that, I just want a clarification. I did indicate earlier that I'm not sure that what we are suggesting is against the scheme of governance. It's certainly against the principles of the systems put in place by the Holyrood Parliament. But I'm interested in what Councillor Ann Ross said, because that ties into what I've said. Because if you look at our scheme of governance, then looking at it, we are allowed to do as we are proposing. So I would like more clarification on that, perhaps from Jill, to see just if she can look at it and say, right, Anne is right, or there is another aspect to it that we're not aware of.
So, officers?
I'm conscious there's other hands up, Chair. I
okay,
Councillor
Ross.
Thank you. Am I speak? Yes, I'm not muted. First of all, we got clarification. This is not retrospectively. Secondly, I do believe that a referral to the Procedures Committee regarding the scheme of governance is pertinent and patent. It may take some time, but it can be done. To me, this is about democracy. We are elected members, and I'm not a local member, but I have heard that the 3 local members are of one mind regarding this. They have done the surveys. I hear what they've said about the surveys. They are all in agreement. And if we don't respect local democracy, the local members, and by no stretch of the imagination am I usually or often in agreement with some of the local members, and this is no offense to the local members, but I often have different views to them. But on this, there is a principle here, and it is very, very important that yes, there's a scheme of governance, but we also have to go by it, but we also have to go by the local democracy and listening to the local members. Now, you've had a motion and you've had a seconder for that motion regarding that. And I'm happy to support both Councillor Goodall and Councillor Withy regarding this, because they know their patch. They have listened to their members and they know what they're saying. And I think it's vitally important as an area committee that they are supported, because local members should know, and they do know, what they're talking about.
So, Jill, can I ask you a question, please? if committee at this stage do not wish to note and wish the scheme of the scheme of governance to go back to procedures committee and through that route, what happens to this paper? What is the end result? And maybe, I don't know if that's Jill or Cheryl can answer that, but if we don't note it today and we ask for the scheme of governance to be re-looked at on the points that Councillor Ross has raised, what happens to this paper?
Thanks, Chair. I'll maybe bring in Cheryl, but you know, my understanding is the head of planning. He's got the authority to make this decision.
So the decision can go, the conservation scheme can go through without this committee's approval, is what you're saying. Is that right?
I would possibly defer to Cheryl, but
I think, yeah, sorry, thank you, Chair, if you don't mind me coming in. There's a few things going around in my head. I suppose one of them is that obviously as from today, we would have been looking to reduce the boundary. So if it doesn't go forward, then we're not looking to reduce the boundary and it stays that larger area. My other concern, and this is something I'll probably have to speak to Jill about, but my understanding is that in terms of the primary legislation, as in what the List of Building and Conservation Area Scotland Act says, is that it is our duty to designate areas that are of special architectural and historic interest. And that's it. It's not to consult, it's not to take it to committee, it's just to identify those areas and make that decision, which is why in the scheme of delegation, it's to the head of planning. And also within the primary legislation, Historic Environment Scotland can designate conservation areas within our local authority area, and they have to consult us, but they can ultimately make the decision. So conservation areas are a little bit like listed buildings. It is identified that at a national level, it's important to designate a listed building as it is a conservation area. And the only reason you don't do it is that it does not meet the criteria. And so that's something I'll have to speak with Jill. And the other thing that is an issue for us as officers is that we carry out a public consultation. If we are then faced with a consultation that was taken out separately, that we weren't involved in and that we have not been party to, we can't take that decision as part of our thought process, and that puts us in a very challenging position, because potentially it meant that there were people that could have come to speak to us who didn't, because they felt that they'd already put their opinion across in a different format. So I can only take the opinions of those people that actually put pen to paper and came and spoke to me. So yeah, I think the legal things are
Cheryl, would you like 10 minutes to discuss this with Jill? And we adjourn the committee because I think we all need a break. We all need to walk away.
Chair, if I may.
Chair,
yeah.
If that's going to happen, would I be able to just come in quickly before it does? Because I was going to ask Jill and Cheryl some, I just wanted them to check something between them as well that they can maybe do at the same time.
Well, I think Tim also wanted to come in and Sarah wants to come in, and you know, we're just not getting anywhere. We need some clarity here.
That's what I'm after, Chair.
I think my concern, Chair, is that I don't think even with a 10-minute recess, there's going to be a situation where there is agreement. I think the harsh reality is that you have a report in front of you that has been through monitoring and is as it is, and the committee's being asked to sort of make a comment on that report. I think the reality is that, you know, a 10-minute recess will not allow officers the time to start looking at some of the wider issues that members have raised, such as looking at the schemes of governance, so which as Jill's highlighted, you know, it is a significant project in its own right, and I think is unlikely to be prompted by one particular issue. My recommendation, which you're welcome to not accept, because that is your wish as as the committee, is that I don't think you're going to get a resolution here. My recommendation is that you highlight your concerns, which we've got, and allow officers to perhaps look at them in consultation with appropriate officers to come back with a view afterwards. I think that would be my recommendation to you. I don't think you're going to be able to get to a situation where you're going to get anything out of this meeting in terms of recommendation that you're happy with. And again, I would reiterate some of the concerns about some of the points that are being made could be conflated with essentially not liking or calling into question officers' competence with regards to the recent survey. And I appreciate that's not what members intend to do, and that's not what they want to do, but that's how that could be construed. So I would double down on recommending that the report it has been monitored, it complies with governance. Clearly members are not happy with it and we have those notes. We can take that away as officers and take further advice. You're not actually being asked as part of the report to make any specific decisions, as has been the case, and we can perhaps come back after a considered discussion about officers about what advice we may give committee, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that today.
I mean, it's asking us to note, it's not asking people to agree.
Indeed, Chair, that's right. And I think to go from what the report is asking you to do to motions about the scheme of governance is simply too big a leap for me. Now, that is my advice. That's all I can say to you.
My feeling is we're being asked to note, we're not being asked to agree it. So the comments have been made that people don't agree with it. I don't see what else we can do.
I still waiting to come back in, Chair, because I did propose something, and
yeah, all right.
Thank you. I just will say off the back of what Tim said first, that I genuinely do have sympathy with Cheryl, because as Tim has said, nobody should be questioning the competence of officers, because what Cheryl's presented is what they have. But that's my whole point to this, is that as local members, we're getting other information that we need the opportunity to also feed into the process. And by simply noting it is not allowing us to do that. You just said comment on Tim. We've not been asked to comment, actually. We've kind of had a bit of free reign, but we weren't actually asked to. I just want to check again, because the proposal that I put forward was that we defer this and request a review of the scheme of governance and the delegated powers. I appreciate what Jill said. That will take a long time, but I think there are numerous councillors, not just in this room today, but across Aberdeenshire, who have requested this review for a very long time. And this is maybe the catalyst that we need to get it happening. So I just want to check, is that a competent amendment? If it's not, then that's fine. But that would be the amendment I propose, that I would request. I would agree to noting what's before us. I think, as Tim says, we have to do that. But I would add an additional recommendation that we defer this whilst we seek a review of the scheme of governance and delegated powers. And we'll see where it goes to from there. And obviously, as part of that, we would request or ask politely that the service pause the process until that review comes back or until it's rejected. Now, they don't have to. Cheryl, I'm sure will tell me that they don't have to. They do have the power to just carry on with it, but I'm sure we can, agree just to pause it whilst we at least get some feedback as to whether the administration or whoever is willing to take that review forward or not. They might say we don't want to review it, in which case we're back where we are and our hands are tied. But I just want to test, can we defer as an amendment? Can we add an additional recommendation that we note it, but we also request that officers pause any further action on it whilst we seek a review of the scheme of delegation and delegated powers? If that's not competent, that's fine. But I haven't actually, nobody's told me it's not competent yet. So if it's not, then I'll shut up. But I keep coming back in because no one's actually told me it isn't.
Cheryl or Jill?
Yeah, I'll ask Jill to come up on the second point in terms of the competence, but the one thing I would say is that if we proceeded with the proposal as it was today, it would mean that there was an instant reduction in the boundary, maybe not the reduction that you're looking for, but it would alleviate some of the concerns of some of the constituents. And then as this is a separate matter, in the current format, this decision can be made by the head of planning and we can proceed with it. If you want to challenge that, then that, Jill, I think that could be set as a separate matter. So you proceed with the reduction today, and then in terms of the decision making in the future, that could be dealt with separately.
That doesn't address what's before us, though. That's the problem, Cheryl, isn't it? It's I'm just looking to find out if it's competent. It's really just is that amendment competent? If it is, I'll move it, and if I get voted down, that's fine. But I think everyone's getting a bit annoyed with me keep coming back in, and the fact that we've been going well over an hour. So I'm trying to draw a conclusion by putting forward the amendment that I tried to put forward several times already. If it's not competent, that's fine. If it is competent, I'll simply move it. If I'm voted against, then that's fine. We move on. But I'm just asking the question, really. Is it a competent amendment? If it is, I'll propose it.
I think that's a fair enough question, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert in legal and governance, Councillor Withy. So I may defer to this to Jill Joss, but what I will do is give you my opinion. And my opinion is that it is not competent. And the reason it's not competent, in my opinion, is simply because you're making a link arising from a paper on Huntley Conservation Area to making a recommendation to reevaluate the scheme of governance, which is far wider ranging than this particular issue. You know, a review of the scheme of governance, you know, would be drawn out of something that was much wider ranging than something related to the conservation review. So my opinion is predicated on the fact that this is a report on the Huntley Conservation Area, and I simply cannot envisage a situation where it would be competent to go from what's effectively a disagreement, which I respect the fact of members to disagree with what's being proposed, to recommending a scheme of governance. So as I said, my opinion, because I'm not qualified to give you a formal comment, is it would not be competent, and that's why I made the suggestion earlier that I think, you know, if we're in that territory, members simply need to be highlighting their concerns and allowing officers to have a look at that in a more considered atmosphere, which I don't think can be done today.
Are we talking, sorry, are we talking about the scheme of governance or the scheme of delegation? Because they're both being mentioned.
My opinion would be in relation to them both, Chair.
So, sorry, Chair. Scheme of delegation would be it, but I believe it has to go through the scheme of governance, but Jill might correct me.
Yes, Chair, it would be I think it'd be the list of officers' powers under which is all under the scheme of governance. Chair, I would like to just maybe have an adjournment just to have a look into that issue as to whether it's competent or not.
I agree. So we're going to adjourn till 15:15. Is that long enough? And if it isn't long enough, then we'll take a break and we'll take the Connethment paper before you come back in, but we'll need you back in. That's the trouble as our monitoring officer.
That's okay.
So does everybody agree that we will come back at, it's 4:02? We'll come back at 4:10 and see what position Jill's in, and if she needs more time to decide whether Robbie's proposed motion is competent, then we will move on to the Connethment School paper. Are we agreed?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.